never slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. I don't ever.
Hey team, I hope you're all doing well. Today's topic I wanted to discuss more on tempo runs, and you know, a lot of we have a lot of different terminologies, as we all know, in middle to long distance running, where we talk about tempo runs versus anaerobic threshold runs or lactate threshold runs. Tempo runs are basically when you're running at, there's two categories of ventilatory threshold. Ventilatory threshold 1 and ventilatory threshold 2. Ventilatory threshold 1 is basically where you're running around 66 to around 72% of maximum heart rate. And that is basically tempo effort. Tempo effort is slightly less aggressive than anaerobic threshold running. So if you're doing a tempo runs is basically running at a comfortably hard effort that you can sustain for about 60 minutes, about an hour. And of course, most runners, whether you're a beginner or you're very advanced elite level athletes, have to start off with much shorter duration in terms of doing tempo runs, because again, these are very aggressive. They are aggressive running, but they're not so aggressive that you're running at your VO2 max, your maximum oxygen uptake, the point where you're running so fast, you're producing so much lactic acid that you can't clear it faster than it's building up. So, you know, when you're doing speed intervals, you're doing repeat 200s, repeat Ks on the track, repeat 600s, those types of workouts where you're running so fast you have to stop and take short breaks before you can do your next interval. That's an example of running at VO2 max. But tempo runs are more sustainable. They're aggressive, but they're, as I mentioned, they're comfortably hard. You should not feel like when you're doing a tempo run that you're running so aggressive that you're forced to stop. Of course, if you are doing, say, in the early stages of a build-up, if you're training for a 10-miler or a 10K on the roads or a half marathon or a marathon, it's going to be very natural for you, especially if you are running too aggressive too early, to stop or to significantly slow down. And again, with time and as you get fitter, as you know your body more, you're going to be able to adjust that pacing, and you're going to be able to sustain your tempo runs for a longer period of time. And I've said this in other videos, one of the biggest reasons why I was able to run a 2:19 marathon was longer tempo runs. Okay, my tempo runs they started off between 3 to 4 miles in the early stages of a build-up, my build-ups over the years. And then I've always worked to get those tempo runs out to around 12 miles, around 12 to sometimes even up to half marathon distance, around 13 miles in length. And usually when I could do a tempo run at around in the 5:15s to 5:30s pace, in that range per mile, I knew I was ready to really race a marathon competitively. And I also get a lot of questions about tempo runs and what are good indicator type workouts that will give you a better indication of what you can run for a marathon. My recommendation is, what can you do over a 10 mile or 16 kilometers up to around 12 to 13 mile tempo runs? What can you do per mile or per kilometer for that particular duration? And again, that's going to be around, give or take, based on how fit you are, around 60 minutes or slightly over 60 minutes. But again, you don't want to run so aggressive that you're producing so much lactic acid that you can't handle that. And again, that's the faster we run, the more aggressive we're running, the more inflammation that's created, the more oxygen that's necessary for us to be able to sustain that particular goal pace we're aiming for our tempo runs. And again, tempo runs should be about 10 seconds slower than your anaerobic threshold runs. AT pace is very aggressive. It's very hard. You're running at your lactate threshold, which is your anaerobic threshold, i.e. your lactate threshold is running at your ventilatory 2 threshold. again, as I mentioned earlier in this video, there's two forms of ventilatory thresholds, V1 and V2. V1 is basically where you're running at tempo runs effort. You're running at tempo pace up to around 66 to 72% of max heart rate. When you're running at V2 effort, which is running around your anaerobic threshold or lactate threshold, you're running around 88 to 92% of your max heart rate. And again, these percentages are going to vary slightly from individual to individual, because obviously some athletes that are younger have a higher heart rate. Some athletes that are older will have a lower maximum heart rate. So again, we have to adjust where we're running at. But again, when you're running at your tempo run effort, tempo runs are run around 66 to around 72% of max heart rate. Okay. Again, there are differences, slight differences between running at tempo run effort and running at your anaerobic threshold or your lactate threshold. Those are much more aggressive type efforts. And again, you do want to start off running much easier, much more controlled in terms of your duration. Your tempo runs should be much shorter in the early stages of a buildup. But as you get fitter and you become more anaerobically fit, you want to make sure you're extending the duration that you're running at your tempo run effort. Okay, that's going to help you improve your lactate tolerance, your ability to clear lactic acid more effectively, and to be able to sustain your race pace longer than your competition. And there's plenty of different types of workouts that you can do in terms of tempo runs. If you don't want to run sustained effort throughout, like say you don't want to do a 2 to 3 mile run continuous, you can break that up and say like a fartlek workout, maybe running 30 minutes of 1 minute hard, 1 minute easy. And again, running at tempo run effort during the harder effort, and then running at very easy relaxed pace for the 1 minute float effort in between each one of those harder reps. And again, that is really the key when it comes to racing a marathon or racing a 10 miler or a half marathon. Yes, you still have to run easy. You still have to focus on aerobic mileage and building your base and building your endurance. But you also want to make sure that with tempo runs, you're increasing your pace sustainability, your ability to break down less in your race versus the athlete that maybe is not paying as much of attention to the volume they're doing, but more importantly, the percentage of the volume that they're doing each week maybe is not as high or is not as aggressive as it should be. Okay, if you look at the world's top middle to long distance runners, they're running around 35 to 40% of their weekly volume at or below their anaerobic threshold effort. So again, they're running even faster than tempo effort for a relatively high percentage of their weekly volume. So of course, they make it look easy for a reason. Yes, they're obviously, they do have a genetic capability. But again, I think that work output, your willingness to stay committed over several years rather than several weeks or months is what's going to dictate your overall success as a middle to long distance runner, especially as you implement your tempo runs strategy over a long period of time. Again, it takes 28 days for the body to adapt to any stress load you're placing on it. So you're not going to be able just to go out there and start, not me or anybody else, really. You're not going to just start off doing 10-mile tempo runs the first couple weeks of your buildup. You have to first learn how to handle 2 to 3 mile tempo runs. And then as you get fitter anaerobically and as well as aerobically, then you want to work on extending that duration of the time you're spending at your tempo run effort so that, again, you're improving that lactate tolerance, your ability to clear lactic acid more efficiently so that, again, you can run more economically throughout your race and handle more pain. And again, make training the most difficult part of your preparation. When it comes to racing, that's the day of celebration. That's the day where you put all of you've tapered down correctly. You've spent several months doing tempo runs, doing efforts at anaerobic threshold effort, doing one speed workout per week, running at your VO2 max effort, running so fast you can't clear it your lactic acid faster than it's building up, that's going to help you to get your goal race pace to feel that much easier for you. So I hope this video on tempo runs is helpful for you. If you have any other questions, leave me a comment below. There are plenty of resources below all these videos, as well as on RunDreamAchieve.com if you want to take your training and racing to the next level. Thank you so much for your support, whether you're a brand new subscriber to this channel or if you've been with me since 2019 when I started this channel. Thank you so much for your support, and I will talk to you all in the next video.